Hello and welcome to episode 23 of The Racer's Edge, coming to you in association with F1 Racing Magazine as ever. Well, Formula One may be in shutdown, but we're still here and we're looking back at the Hungarian Grand Prix, and I'm doing so with the editor of F1 Racing, Anthony Rowlinson. Anthony, what a weekend. Hot, but much more than that. Lewis scored his first win for Mercedes. Do you think this is the beginning of a Lewis Hamilton-Mercedes year now?
I hope so. That's the partisan bit. I mean, it's all down to whether Mercedes have really nailed that rear tyre issue that sort of bugged them a bit, well, for a number of years, and they've partially got on top of it this season, and if they can nail it in a race that's got 50 degree plus track temperatures, maybe they've nailed it for the rest of the year. We don't conclusively know because Hungary's a funny little tight track, may not be quite the same as Spa and Monza, but on paper it looks good.
Well, it's difficult to imagine them being slower at Spa and Monza as well. As we've been saying all year, the Merc engine is a very good engine in those circuits. We've seen that in the past. And if they get the tyres to last there, albeit on a sort of go-karty circuit, in the relatively cold weather of Spa and Monza, well, not necessarily Monza, but Spa, should be there. But then there's a great groundswell out there of everybody saying, oh no, when they get to Asia, it's going to be Red Bull and Sebastian Vettel again. And what's your general feeling about that? Where do you feel Red Bull were at in Hungary?
Oh, they were still right there. They're still absolutely right there. I mean, Lewis's pole lap was pretty inspired, and he beat Seb by a tenth, half a tenth. It was minuscule. You know, Mark said a 1:24 fastest lap right at the end on soft, admittedly, but you know he was right on it. Seb would have been higher up, but for his little wing tap with Button. I still think Lewis had it covered though, and to me that was the most significant thing from the weekend. Was that I think, probably for the first time this year, maybe with one or two exceptions, Red Bull were beaten on sheer pace, and it's very, very rare that you can say that. I think the Mercedes with Lewis, a bit hard to say with Nico, but the Lewis-Mercedes I think was the fastest combo at that track. And if that can be replicated, then we do have an absolutely mega run into the end of the season.
Well, I was chatting to Rob Wilson about this, and he's going to be on the show very shortly. But he made the point that Adrian's car is actually quite hard on tyres, and usually is. It's just got a lot of grunt, a lot of downforce. And we saw that in Hungary. I know Sebastian damaged his wing, but if you look at it relative to the Lotus E21, which was about as quick, you'd have to say, as a Red Bull, if not maybe slightly quicker, much, much easier on its tyres. And one wonders whether that's going to be a factor now as we go further. It's really interesting, I think, to be able to get into the mind of Adrian Newey now to see what he's thinking about that, because to me that comparison between the Red Bull and the Lotus was perhaps even more significant than bringing the Mercedes into it.
I think the lovely thing that Lotus has got as well, and what a gift for any team, or what a luxury, is that it gives them flexibility over strategy. You know, they switched Kimi from a 3 to a 2, and whatever lap it was, suddenly hear the Kimi pit instruction, okay, plus 10 Kimi, plus 10. I mean, run 10 more laps on your tyres. Nobody else had that option. Everybody else was basically nailed onto a 3-stopper, but Kimi, okay, 10 more laps, no problem. And as we saw at the end, he still had enough life in them to hold off Seb. They were 10 seconds down on Lewis, admittedly, but you know, a Kimi Lotus beat a Seb Red Bull on pace. So two cars actually were able to put in a quicker race than a Vettel Red Bull.
And not only on pace, you could argue, but also on race management. Because, I mean, here's a question. Do you think if Seb hadn't damaged his wing and maybe had a clearer run in traffic, do you think he could have done a 2-stop strategy?
That's interesting. I don't know. As far as I'm aware, Red Bull never considered it. I think they were only ever going for 3. That's the impression I got.
There is the difference between the two. Because it's one thing to run a 2-stop if you're slightly off the pace, but if you're absolutely on the pace, the winning pace. And the next point, I guess, is had Kimi qualified front row, which is really where that car could have qualified, could he have won that race?
Yes, is the short answer. Yes.
And that brings us back to another point, which I've been banging on about for a while, which is that from the minute that Kimi joined the team, was that, in my view, and perhaps I'm the only guy in the world that thinks this, but in my view, he's about 2 to 3 tenths slower on one lap than he was in the McLaren days. But on race day, in terms of putting a race together, he's exactly where he was. And the one thing that they're missing there is that 1 lap pace from Kimi, and it's such a shame. And Romain has that, as you say. I mean, he showed how quick that car was, and if you could almost swap drivers and let Romain qualify the car and then Kimi race it, you'd have just like the perfect combination, wouldn't you?
I was having a chat with my Autosport colleague Ed Straw yesterday morning, so Monday after the race, and I said that Kimi now reminds me of Niki Lauda in '84. Not quite as quick as he once was, but still totally mega in a race, capable of controlling a faster teammate, Alain Prost, and winning a championship.
And I remember watching the final round in '84 with John Hogan actually, and Nicky was there in the middle of the grid somewhere, and the feeling was, is he going to get through the first corner? And then immediately afterwards you think, yeah, of course he will, he's Niki Lauda.
Yeah.
And he will surround his car, as Carlos Reutemann used to say, with cotton wool. Nobody was going to go near his car. And you have that feeling about Kimi today, that if he really does want to get through the first 3 laps and then put a race together, he will do it. He will not allow anybody to affect what he's going to do that Sunday. And that's a great quality that you build up. And to some extent, it's a reflection also of the respect the other drivers have for that driver. They had for Nicky back in '84. Wow, it's Niki Lauda, we won't go near him, sort of thing. Obviously race drivers don't think that way, but there is this sort of aura you build up, and Kimi has it. And the more he drives races like Hungary, the more he's going to carry that momentum. There's so many things to talk about, but I guess on the back of Hungary, you'd have to say, from Kimi's point of view, you wouldn't really want to be thinking about driving anywhere else in 2014, would you?
Well, I'm of exactly the same opinion, but I can see all the attractions of going to a new e-car, the Red Bull salary, the Red Bull package all around it, potentially a Red Bull future with motocross, which is something he's into, and this, that and the other, whatever else they offer. But then you think he's got this lovely life at Lotus. They don't hassle him, he doesn't hassle them, plugs in, drives brilliant races. In some ways it's all any racing driver ever wants, isn't it? Just the ability to be left alone and drive a racing car fast. And just a quick thing, after the race in Hungary, I was doing my usual round in the paddock afterwards, as journos do. I caught up with Roman for about 5 seconds after he'd been up to the stewards, and he was just disconsolate, slightly stooped, didn't want to talk. That's motor racing, but you could see that wasn't really what he believed. Kimi, by contrast, was in the Lotus motorhome, 2 or 3 of his little crew there, each having a beer. He finished his beer, picked up an ice cream, just toddled off to some engagement. And you think the guy's just finished second, and he's so completely relaxed and chilled with himself and his life and his world. Why burst that bubble? I mean, he's obviously just very content doing what he's doing.
Well, we know why that bubble might be burst. It's because he's got a management team that are very hungry for the right deal for their driver, which also might be the right deal for them, financially speaking. And one assumes that if Ferrari are talking to Kimi, which I believe they are, it's massive money. It always would be at Ferrari. And at Red Bull, it isn't going to be small, is it? If they really want him. So that's the problem that whole Raikkonen Robertson package needs to encounter and solve, is what do we do about the money? Because there isn't going to be a massive amount of money at Lotus. One would assume 5-6 mil, I would guess.
Peanuts.
Exactly. Well, to the editor of F1 Racing, no doubt. Anthony, let's talk about Romain Grosjean. I know you're a bit of a fan, actually, of Romain.
I think he's great. Yeah, I think he's much maligned and unfairly so. I mean, yes, he loses his head. Yes, he's inexperienced, but he's still done less than 30 Grand Prix, I think. I don't check the stats, but it's not many. But what I love is, I love drivers who entertain. I always loved Keke Rosberg in the day. Obviously, a massive Mansell fan. It almost goes without saying, doesn't it? I just love drivers who you can see sort of leading with their chin a little bit, actually. And I mean, it's unfortunate because it means they have crashes and they drive into walls. I'm looking at a picture of Monaco there and thinking, what a terrible Monaco Romain had. But the flip side of that is that amazing Q3 lap he put in when he went from the back of the grid to stick it, second quickest at that moment. Yeah. And I love drivers who will sort of flip a coin like that. And you can actually see the edginess of what they're doing. And just as we were talking before the show, I mean, it's always like a high wire act with Romain, or jumping off the high board, and you hope he'll hit the cup or the little bucket at the bottom. Most of the time he does. Sometimes it's a head-on splat, isn't it? But I think he's great. I think he's really good for F1. He's good box office. And
I have to agree with you. And I think passing on the outside always has a certain buzz to it, regardless of the circuit, regardless of the situation. I think anyone who passes on the outside, you've got to say, wow, that's what this sport to some extent is all about. Fernando Alonso did a bit of passing on the outside at turn 3 in Barcelona this year. And but I remember he actually previewed that by saying, I was watching the GP2 race and I realised there was quite a lot of grip there, so I thought I'd use the same bit of road. And that's kind of disappointing in a way, because you just wanted to do the high jump and just do it on the outside without actually watching the GP2 race. And I think Romain, as you say, doesn't need to watch anybody else. He'll just do it. And
maybe that's the difference between an Alonso and Grosjean.
Well, exactly, yeah. One's a young Frenchman who's going to make mistakes. The other's Fernando Alonso who's going to win races and world championships. But Romain's... Well, let's have your take on the penalties and how you felt when you heard that was going on and you saw the disconsolate Romain afterwards.
Yeah, I think to say he was harshly treated is, I think, probably wrong, actually, because he is a marked man, and I think the stewards are obliged to probably do what they did. He did pass Massa with all four wheels off the track, and if as everybody always says, if there had been a wall there, well, that move would never have happened. It wouldn't have been hit the wall. He wouldn't have done the move. And that is a reality that sort of the sport allows you to escape now, because the walls aren't there anymore. So I don't think it's wrong that the stewards were pretty strict with him. I do think they'd have been less strict with another driver. He is a marked driver in that way. That is just something he's going to have to deal with if he's going to stay in the sport. And to say, oh, but for that I'd have been winning the race, or oh, but for this I'd have been winning the race, then you can't really do that, because these things don't happen to Kimi, do they? Kimi is the cotton wool driver. Kimi is the guy who won't get involved in the dust-up and will finish a very strong fighting second. And that's what probably Roma has to learn from a guy like Kimi.
How do you see this marked man business as a sort of, it's something that's there in the background, or is it an absolute reality where the stewards are saying, well, he's done this, he did that, we know what happened at Spa, he's got 4 more races before we get rid of the marked man bit, and then he's in the clear? How actually is that working, or do you think it's much more of an emotional thing?
I mean, drivers get reputations, don't they? Like, Andrea de Crasheris and Manson in his younger days, Hunt the Shunt. And if you have that tag, people are going to think that's what you do, and it takes a long time for the reality, if the reality is different, to change the perception. And the perception is that Roman is that he's a guy who drives into walls and drives into other drivers. It sort of forgets the fact that he's very fast and very capable, but he's got that tag. He is that guy at the moment.
Do you think Pastor Maldonado still has that?
No, because he's not at the front of the grid. and who knows? And he managed to hang on to it for a fantastic race win last year, didn't he? But you're absolutely right. Obviously, he absolutely did have that reputation last year, didn't he? This year it's Roman. Since Spa last year, it really has been Roman.
Right. Well, let's get the views of Rob Wilson about not only Romain but about the race and Fernando and Kimi. And Rob knows Kimi pretty well too. So here's Rob Wilson. First of all, Romain Grosjean's driving and then the subsequent penalties he incurred.
Well, his race car driving was very fast when it came to his lapping. What he's very good at is rotating the car, getting a direction change. We saw this at the Spanish Grand Prix, I think a year and a half ago, where those last couple of little chicaney things that they've annoyingly put in at the end of the lap. If the race had been through those corners, the Grand Prix, the Spanish Grand Prix, he would have won it. His direction change was excellent. It gets a bit inaccurate from time to time, over curbs a bit, but not a big penalty for that, particularly on the left-hand one in Spain, because then you're turning right again immediately after that, so you don't suffer a big penalty for doing it. But he looked good. You get to Hungary, and once again, he could get that nose in and rotate that car relatively early in the corner, and therefore would reduce any possibilities of understeer. And if you just have a little bit of understeer going in to those corners in Hungary, you've got it for a long time, like a very mini oval. It started and effectively it's over. And so he was getting that extra degree of angle change going in the early part of the corner, and it gave him, therefore, a slightly softer exit, made the track a little bit fatter on the exit, did a really good job. Then there's a small judgment, like this arrogance of assumption that I'm past this guy, it's okay. It's the sort of stuff that he should have been doing in GP2 or something for a while, and then you mature, and then you're good for Formula One. He seems to be a bit late still a little bit late in developing in that area there. So just needs to not be quite so assumptive that there's only him on the track. Caught him out a couple of times. The thing with Jenson Button, that was unreasonable. It's only what Kimi did to Sebastian, going in when he overtook him a little bit, just moved over to fatten his line up a little bit. But Kimi's judgment was a little better, and also, he just knew that Sebastian would back out of that, so he was okay. So that's all he did there. The then running wide when he overtook Massa, again. It's the same as Mark Webber did exactly the same thing. I'm not going to make the exit here. I will just get it straight. And it's only the same thing. The only difference was that he was overtaking Massa, and that therefore is unfair. But, that's the way it is these days. Put a wall on the outside of it, the corner, and you'll hit it, and then you may take a slightly more mature attitude towards it. But that incident is a product of what we're doing with our racetracks now. A committee decision based on how you did. Had there been a wall there, he'd have backed out a bit sooner, and that would have, and things would have carried on. It's really just a product of that. I don't think you can blame him for that, because that's the environment that we've created. So penalty. Yeah, avoidable, mainly because where Sebastian backed out of it, and Jensen, probably it's a shorter, squarer corner, so he probably wouldn't have had time to do it anyway, and he would have had to drive on the grass. They're just still giving me a little bit of a hard time to say, you're still the bad guy, mature a little bit more.
For the racers out there, I suppose you could say, isn't it great to see somebody trying to pass Massa on the outside of that left-hander? And isn't it a shame that he then got the stop-go for doing something that was different and brave? But I know you're a stickler for detail, and the white line is the white line, right?
Well, yeah, the white line's a bit silly, really. Brave, good to see the overtaking. It still only exists because they've built the Utah salt flats on the outside of the corner. So it's still not real. So people say, it's great to see brave. Well, you can be brave as long as you know you're just going to drive off the outside of the track and do it. It isn't that brave,
And you're a stickler for detail. The Kimi Räikkönen cone at Bruntingthorpe is a big deal, right? It's the racetrack is the racetrack.
Well, in that instance, are you going to gain time by it? There is a cone or two that we don't penalise them for. It's only there to stop you driving through a hole that's going to break a wheel. But if you get away with it, there's no big penalty there. But yes, if you know that it's going to pick up time, and in that instance with Roman. They say brave, not really unaware that whether Massa's going to lift out of it or not. Massa did. Button didn't. I don't know that's brave. I think it's still just a tiny judgment thing going on there. But the guy's definitely going fast. Kimi had a lot more understeer in qualifying.
Well, let's go back to that point. You're talking about rotation. Let's talk about his rotation relative to Kimi's.
Is there a possibility that there was a setup issue with that car of Kimi's? Did his car have more understeer? Kimi's ability to change direction on the car is excellent. He does it with that gradual little turn, and then the rotation that comes after. You build up a twist in the car. Grosjean's is a little more abrupt, and will work on the flick corners, in the gymkhana courses and go-kart tracks. It's going to work very well there. Whereas Kimi's will work a little bit better, maybe not so much on a go-kart track. Now then he finds he's got understeer, so he's trying to warn the car, give it little turns and go in, but it's not quite doing it. So then he has to think, well, I'll turn sooner still. So he's taking a very early line going in, because his thinking is, I'm coming up to this corner, I've got understeer. If I try and take a later traditional line, say a Sebastian Vettel, I'll never get back over there. So he just has to start turning even sooner, putting on more steering, and it still wasn't going to work. So I think it had to come from a setup. Maybe he needs a car that points in a little bit better than Grosjean, because Grosjean will manhandle it. Kimi will just guide it nicely.
Lewis Hamilton's performance?
Well, it couldn't have really been any better, could it? He got a clean run, and a little bit like it was like the first few laps at Silverstone, except this time it lasted. And so much of it was relative to what's happening next. He got a great break with Webber. He got a great break with a couple of people overtaking, and Räikkönen didn't. But he, as he said in the interview after the race, that was because he, had problems in qualifying, and then you just make another problem for yourself. So the relative pace is pretty similar between Kimi and Lewis. But yes, once he got going, once he wasn't under pressure, once he was being guided by Jock Clear, we heard Jock talking quite a lot on the radio there, extremely well. Yeah, it was an immaculate drive. I saw Niki Lauda say his overtaking moves were as good as he'd ever seen anywhere. I think there are circumstances involved in that, where Webber's looking at Hulkenberg in front of him, and Lewis is just driving his outside line, and he happened to overtake. I think Lewis would know that as well. But it's part of the media story,
Lewis is the driver now that he can be, or do you think there's still any work to be done relative to Nico?
Well, the circumstances fell well in his favour. Lewis under pressure, running in second place, trying to overtake, may still get a little hard on the tyres, maybe, but anyone would be following a car. So yeah, I would say on that day, Lewis was just immaculate, and Nico, because we know is a technical wizard, but you can only technical yourself so far. If someone's just going to drive faster and still have some elegance about his style, they could beat you. So this is really a wake-up call for Nico, who was just beginning to ride the wave, and now Lewis has turned that around. And this is part of the fascination of motor racing. Now the next time it could well be that Nico's car works, and then there'll be a big story. Nico has got the momentum again. I think it's sort of semi-wishful thinking, and it can change race by race. I think Derek Daly put it right, his scoosh. I'm not sure that's Irish. I think that's more Midwest in America. A scoosh quicker, and it's just a fascinating battle. A technician, versus an out-and-out racer. And neither, Lewis does work hard on his driving. He does try and make the car work. He does work with the engineers. He'll do anything to make the car work better. And Nico Rosberg can be an out-and-out racer as well. It's not, the big difference isn't as big as people think. One is not a robot and the other one is just a completely natural talent. They're pretty close.
Fernando Alonso over the weekend?
Fernando Alonso must be wondering, if the Ferrari team are wondering, why did Kimi Räikkönen achieve in 1 year what he's failed to achieve in 3 years? He's a great driver, good driver. The Ferrari looks a bit clumsy, and I would have thought if I was Fernando, the last thing you want is Kimi Räikkönen does a great soldier's job. That's what he does. But look at the podium there with Räikkönen, Hamilton, Vettel. You're almost looking at the three fastest racing drivers in the world. And Fernando's going to have to work a little bit to become the fourth one. He obviously is. But it's looking a little bit... German Grand Prix 1963 with John Surtees. Not quite there. Yeah, it did, yeah. But he didn't win the title, Jimmy Clark was doing the Vettel thing.
Thanks, Rob.
Okay, thank you, Peter.
Rob Wilson, I should just correct that. Of course, it wasn't a stop-go, it was a drive-through that Romain had. Apologies for that. Interesting to get Rob's views on Romain. I think he kind of agrees with you that there's this wonderful flair and talent out there. But as he says, where we're going now, if you look at the fight now potentially between Nico and Lewis, apart from anything else, that's going to be captivating between now and the end of the year. Mm-hmm. How was Nico all weekend, do you think? How did you see his weekend?
If I'm honest, he's one of the drivers that sort of took my eye off, really, because Lewis was very much in the ascendant and had the sort of whole momentum of the weekend went his way. And Nico's race result obviously was non-existent because of the retirement at the end. So he didn't seem to be a factor, actually. Lewis was just the Mercedes man this weekend.
Interesting, I thought. Nico, he didn't use it as an excuse at all, but he said on his Q3 lap he had a problem with the brake balance adjuster, which no doubt would have had some impact on the lap. But then he immediately qualified it by saying, but the pole wasn't there. Mm-hmm. But I think we're in good shape for tomorrow given the setup of the car. So whatever that means, we'll have to wait and see. But I think that is going to be really interesting. And in the column I've written this month, I was talking about how I felt Nico had got the slight edge on Lewis. And I think Lewis has I think he has definitely learnt, and this is a guy who is self-critical, as we've said throughout his career, and we see him now driving beautifully. The really big test, I think, in terms of the comparison, is going to be when we get to a high-speed stop, and we're going to have those at Spa, we're going to have those at Monza, and we're going to see how Lewis does compare with Nico there, because Nico's been so good in that area all year. James Allison, Anthony, Ferrari finally confirming everything that we suspected all along. Great news for them. How much of an immediate impact are we going to see, do you believe?
Well, he'll obviously been thinking about what he wants to do for the last 3 months. It was Melbourne that he was the last race he did for Lotus, wasn't it? Whether he's been able to sort of, bring sketches or CAD drawings in his head, or idea, design philosophies. I mean, you would imagine that he's going to build Ferrari a Lotus E21 next year, a Ferrari F139 stroke E21 or E22. You would imagine, because the tyre regs next year aren't changing. I know the aero regs are very similar or slightly different, and got this massive engine change which is going to affect things. But it seems that a car that's still kind of its tyres is going to be something that you want next year. So I'd imagine that Ferrari will go down that direction.
Yeah, and Fernando Alonso, a little bit, as Rob was saying, it's slightly weird weekend for Ferrari there. They were kind of there, not as bad as they have been, but certainly not on the pace. And I wonder how they're feeling. I mean, I know I've made this point before, but I'll make it again. That James Allison was at Ferrari. They knew the guy. Fernando had worked with him at Renault. You have to ask why they didn't rehire him 3 years ago. You know, when Fernando joined Ferrari.
Ferrari's a strange organisation,
yeah.
isn't it? You know, with its own strange internal politics and dynamics, like any team, I suppose, but they're perhaps a bit more apparent at Ferrari. And maybe James didn't want to go back there. You know, he's quite an Anglophile from everything I gather.
But the point is, he has gone back. So
he has. Well,
something's persuaded him.
Well,
I wonder if it's the old dollar that he's now valued at in the pit lane that perhaps wasn't there 3 years ago. But then more fool for Ferrari for not perceiving that, because they had enough information.
Yeah.
In Maranello and from Fernando to know how good this guy was. But anyway, like you, I think he'll have a massive impact there. And I think the only thing that's slightly disappointing, actually, is from Ferrari's point of view, is that they're going to this whole new regulation, which is going to be very engine dominated, certainly in the first year, and possibly slightly less than you can do today with Coanda and a few other things. And yes, all the subtle aero tweaks are still potentially there, but it's not as if he's going there to build this E21 basically the same regulations. It's a whole new thing. And Luca Marmorini, the engine guy at Ferrari, will have no doubt a huge say as well in the architecture of the car and the back end of the car. So really interesting times for Ferrari. Good news for Fernando. Interesting again to think what they're going to do about the second driver there. What's your view?
Let's rewind a little bit. I can't believe Felipe's still there. I understand why he is, and I totally get Ferrari's loyalty to him and the fact that, you know, he did almost die in one of their cars, which must make you feel very differently about a driver, particularly one who's been so good. Let's not forget that, you know, Massa had won the 2008 World Championship for 200 yards. I honestly can't believe he's still a front running. A guy who occupies a top seat. I think, without wishing to be harsh, I just think his moment's gone, and I think the evidence is there. I feel like, what more do you need to see to show that Felipe isn't the driver he was? And I think he's a fabulous guy, and, you know, very popular. People love him. And I wouldn't want to see him sacked, really. But if you're saying that's a Ferrari, you know, always one of the two most desirable seats in F1, I don't think he's good enough to justify it anymore.
So who's going to be in there next year?
Maybe Kimi. You know. Would they take a punt on Jules Bianchi? Probably not. It could have been Mark Webber if things had played out differently, hadn't it? Couldn't it? But
it's a good point, actually. Let's talk about that. Why has Mark decided to retire and not leave an option open to go to Ferrari for next year, bearing in mind they offered him a drive for 2013?
Yeah, well, he's quit for a season, isn't he? And he's going to lead the Porsche endurance car WEC program. Maybe he senses that there could be a route back in if that doesn't work out for him. I don't know. I mean, you know Mark better than I know Mark quite well, but I get the feeling he's just reached a nice place with his F1 career. He might, if things had been slightly different for him at Red Bull, I'm absolutely sure he would have stayed on and become a quadruple world champion. But, you know, history didn't work out that way. I just think he's of an age where he thinks, I've achieved everything I wanted to, apart from the world title. I've got a fantastic opportunity to do something else. You know, the tyre regs he hates now. I don't think he's going to enjoy the engine regs the way they're going. I think he'll like being able to drive around in a big, heavy, fast car that you can just rag around for 20 hours. And without some of the nonsense that's an inevitable part of F1, I think he'll have a great time in sports cars. And I think that's probably, as a package, very appealing to him. He doesn't need the money anymore, you know, not in the way that people need money. You know, he's financially secure for the rest of his life. So,
and I'll tell you something else. Because it's Porsche, and maybe because Mark's there as well, I think they're going to get some very, very good people working in that team as well. In fact, I even hear on the grapevine that some good guys from Sauber recently have said we're going to Porsche next year. So there's a couple of things I just want to get your input on. One is Sauber, where they're at, the whole Russian thing now. What's the view of Sauber, Nico Hülkenberg's future? 1. 2, Daniel Ricciardo, where's he going to be? 3, Paul di Resta. So let's start with Sauber first of all.
Well, Sauber and Hulkenberg. The depth of their financial problems appears to be quite great, and obviously one has to be careful about what one says. But I mean, this has been admitted on the record by members of the team and widely reported in the German-Swiss press. So the deals that they've done with these new Russian partners are significant, and as far as we can understand, possibly even team-saving. The depth of their financial woe was that great. I don't think they'd be looking at a 17-year-old son of a Russian minister as a driver if it wasn't for financial inducement. Sergei Sirotkin. Moving on to Hulkenberg, as you mentioned. Now he's someone that Ferrari should definitely be looking at if they haven't already actually done that in some kind of pre-contractual way. He's obviously a talent wasted at Sauber this year. We all understood why he went there, because Sauber last year looked like a pretty smart place to be, potentially a race-winning team, as were Force India, of course, his old team. But he's definitely someone any top team looking for a driver should be running the rule over, and maybe Ferrari have done so already. Yeah,
it makes a lot of sense for him to go there, and you can imagine him being nicely positioned alongside Fernando, quick enough to do the job, but ultimately Fernando will have the polish and and he'll have the the momentum, I guess is the right word. Okay, Daniel Ricciardo and Paul di Resta.
Well, Danny continues to impress, doesn't he? He's a great young guy. He's got that lovely Webber thing of, maybe it's just an Aussie thing, of being approachable and not having too much ego, but at the same time being very confident about what they do, which is always a nice balance, because it means they can be brilliant at their sport without being lost in the sort of sportsman type celebrity thing.
They just smile a lot and have a laugh, mate. That's all it is. Just have fun.
It's good, isn't it? Aussies and F1 are popular guys, so I mean, let's hope he doesn't change. I don't think he will, because I think it's the way he is. So let's hope he doesn't. I'd like to see him in a more competitive car. I think he's shown those flashes of excellence that you want to show as a young driver. If you look at all the top guys now, they've all done it some way. Alonso did it early in his career, winning very early, taking a pole very early. Kimi did it immediately at Sauber. Jensen did enough in his first year at Williams just to catch the eye, and I think Danny's done that the last couple of years. He's done one or two exceptional qualifying performances like Bahrain last year, and escapes me this year, but he stuck it in Q3 once this year, maybe twice. Q1, and I think he's just done enough to show that there's more there than just being very good. He might be very, very good, possibly even exceptional. Whether he's another Vettel or not, I don't know. But
again, like Hulkenberg with Alonso, could be a very nice counterpoint to Vettel in that team.
Yeah.
Di Resta, is his name still on everybody's lips? Some people's lips?
I think Paul's got a media problem, to be honest. I think, irrespective of how good or bad he is in the cockpit, and he's shown well again this year, you have to say, he just doesn't come across very well as someone that, he doesn't give off sunshine in the way that Daniel Ricciardo does, and that might be irrelevant to someone's speed in the car, but the way teams and F1 as a whole works now, you need guys who can radiate a bit of charisma, and Paul tends to radiate surliness, and that's not necessarily because he's a surly guy. He just doesn't give off that happy vibe, and I think that's to his detriment. And it's fixable as well. It's not something that you can't make a driver fast. You can make a driver smile, even if it's false. And I think he needs probably someone around him to say, "Come on, just cheer up and give off a bit of good vibe, because it'll help your career."
But he's not Andy Murray with a steering wheel.
No.
Well, maybe he is actually. Maybe he is. It's interesting. So there are two types of Scott. There's the David Coulthard, Jim Clark, and the Jackie Stewart, and then there's the Andy Murray, Paul di Resta.
Yeah. I probably don't want to get drawn into that piece. I'm not quite sure where you're going with it. But.
Okay, here's another point then. Adrian Sutil, therefore, isn't too bad, is he? I mean, we had him on the show a couple of weeks ago. He came over very well, I think, and again, very quick in qualifying. If Paul di Resta is that quick, then Adrian Sutil has to be very quick as well. And I know he'll kind of get forgotten. He'll probably hopefully end up staying at Force India for another year, which is where he probably belongs. But another very good qualifying performance from him in Hungary. Kind of overlooked by everybody, probably.
I think, honestly, we've got a blessed generation of drivers at the moment. The depth of talent in F1 cockpits right now is remarkable. Right down to if you look at, say, the slowest team in F1, who are arguably Marussia, you've got Jules Bianchi driving. Caterham have got a Charles Pic. Everywhere you go, you go to Williams, who unfortunately are probably the 9th best team in F1. They've got Pastor Maldonado, who is a race winner, and Valtteri Bottas, who I am absolutely sure, as are you, as are most people, will be a race winner one day. Depth of talent's phenomenal. Any of those guys in Mark Webber's seat would win races.
was another driver in the Caterham called Giedo van der Garde, and he's actually done a very good job this year as well. You mentioned Charles Pic. I think it's 6-4 in qualifying now between the two, but it's Guido's first year in Formula One. He made it to Q2 at Monaco, difficult circuit, and then in Hungary, difficult race, very hot, very tiring, very physical race. Finished 14th. 3-stop strategy, beat Pic. He was on a 2-stop strategy. You could argue that was a strategy win, but nonetheless, he made the most of it. And not an easy race when you're being lapped. It's always the same old problem. So I think he's done a very good job this year. We caught up with Giedo. He's supposedly on holiday, but this is what he had to say. Giedo, thanks for joining us, and congratulations on a very good run in Hungary. A long, hot, hard race, and probably by most standards the best race you've had this year, I would have thought.
Yeah, for sure. I think it was a very good one. I think the team got some little mechanical updates to the track, and of course we had the new tires from Pirelli there. I think it suited me much better than the old tires. So yeah, I was very happy over the weekend, and it was a very, very hot race, a tough one as well. But we survived, and I think it was I think it was a very good result.
When we say it was hot and long, it's easy for us sitting on the sidelines to use those adjectives. But actually, in terms of being in the car, when did you feel it most? In the closing laps, or perhaps in the pit stops, or what?
No, I think when you start when you're on the grid, and of course I think towards the end of the race, where you are already suffering and it is so hot and you're fighting with the car because the tires are gone. That is the toughest moment, especially also for me, because the last 30 laps I didn't have any drinks anymore because the system broke and I couldn't ask for water anymore. So it was even more tough.
I've never known any driver whose drink system does work for the entire race. Everybody always seems to complain about that. It's amazing how low on the job list that always is in an engineer's mind.
Yeah, it is. But anyway, I survived, and I think it was a good weekend. So
Giedo, you're breaking up a little bit, but my next question is about the tyres. You mentioned that this year's the tyres you had in Hungary were very different from anything you've had before. Can you just be more descriptive about that? What exactly were the differences from your point of view?
Well, I think there's quite a lot of difference. I mean, the old tyres over one lap, I think the performance was very good. These tires are maybe a little bit worse, let's say, over one lap, but the consistency in the tires is much better. You feel when they're dropping off, you feel what's going to happen with them to not push so much, and I think you can continue driving on them much longer than we used to be, and you don't have to control the temperature any much or more. So for me, there's a lot of changes with the new tires. Plus, you also can lean on them more, so you can turn in a bit earlier, and you can lean more on the tires into the corner. So I think that suits my style as well. So I'm very happy with them.
Giedo, as I say, a good drive in Hungary, and on the back of that Q2 you achieved in Monaco, things looking pretty good for you. I know expectations can't be that high with the team. Everybody has to be realistic. But from your point of view, the season's actually panning out quite well.
Yeah, of course. I mean, it's not easy for a rookie to come in and perform straight away. I think to take some time to adapt to it. I think it helped a lot that my teammate had already 1 year experience, and that the team is helping me a lot out for other stuff around the race days. We have in the team now a new simulators helping me out to learn tracks as soon as possible. Plus the engineers are pushing me as well, and I'm very happy over the season so far, the first part, and it's good to chill out a little bit now, have a little holiday, and then I'm looking forward to the second half.
Giedo, when you are learning a new circuit, you go to a new circuit for the first time, how many laps does it take before you feel you're about where the car can be given that grip level and given the setup you've got at that moment?
I learned the track quite easy. I mean, last year, of course, I had some Friday practices, and I only had 20 laps. I think after 5-6 laps, I know the track and know what to do. And then the track rubbers in a little bit more, and then towards the end, you can improve the time a bit again. So I think it's I don't have any big trouble with new tracks, and of course the simulator helps to get the track beforehand, and I think that's quite good.
And another question that fans often ask is, what is it like for you guys when you always have to keep an eye on the mirrors from, say, halfway through the race onwards and you are being lapped? How do you manage that situation and continue to race, A, and B, does anybody ever say thank you these days when they pass you and you let them pass? Do they put a hand up and wave to say thanks?
No, never. I think the only thing what they do is complain. I think for us it's already hard enough to look in the mirrors more than half the race, and of course we would like to fight with them as well, and we would like to have the same pace as them as well. But unfortunately, it's not like this. We have to deal with the blue flags, but it has to come from both sides. I think we like to lose as less time as possible, and they like to lose as less time as possible. And but so far, I think it's going quite well. I had only one incident in Canada, and that can happen. I learned a lot from it. I think in Hungary everything went quite well.
And you've been making very good starts too. Good start in Hungary, for example, up there with the Williams, with Bottas, I think.
Yeah, starts are going quite well this year. I think in the last few years, always like to have good start opening laps. That's going quite well, and that's something you have. It's a little instinct where you can pass them, maybe outside, inside, and I don't have to worry about that. And it's good to fight with one of the Williamses, and after that, I think it was also a good fight with my teammate.
It was. He was on the 2-stop, you were on the 3-stop, but putting that to one side, it looks like you maximised the call that your engineer made for you, and you couldn't have got a lot more out of the car.
No, I think this was maximum. I think maybe the last 4 or 5 laps, the tires were gone a little bit. But instead, I think, this was a maximum race, also considering how far the Marussias were behind us. I think, it was a perfect job.
And if you look at your fastest lap, not that far away, for example, from a Hulkenberg in a Sauber, and probably Nico had problems of his own. I know he had a gear selection problem, but you're within a second of Hulkenberg. Not bad at all.
No, I think that's really good. I think it looks like that our car performs quite well in the races these days, and still in qualifying, the gap to the guys in front I think is still a bit too much. But in race pace, I think it looks quite good for us, and also the handling of the car feels nice to drive. But of course, in the future we'd like to race with them again, and I think hopefully next year we can make a good step. Once I started with Caterham, I had it was looking very good. And last year I learned a lot with the third driver, Champ, role with me last year. And and then this year in Formula One, and I'm a happy man.
Well, you should be, and you're doing a good job outside the car too with the sponsors, which is such a critical part of Formula One these days. How much of your life does that take up, worrying about that or making sure that you've got what you need in order to progress?
Yeah, I think these days it is important to have some backing, and also you need to have good talent and to have shown yourself in the lower categories, of course, to reach Formula One. But the reality is you need to take some money, and I'm quite lucky that I have good management. They're taking care of me a lot, and they're also finding me a good sponsorship. So I'm a lucky guy in that aspect.
Well, you're doing a good job, as I say. The final question, Giedo, are you thinking in terms of straight on another year with Caterham, or are you thinking perhaps even at this point looking elsewhere for next year?
Well, we'll see. I mean, at the moment, I'm very happy that I think we're doing a good job. I think I'm learning every race. The people there, I like a lot to work with them. So I'm fully concentrated on this year and the second part of the championship. And from there on, we'll see what's going to happen in the next following months.
Well, good luck to you for the second half of the year, and thanks for talking to us. You're on holiday at the moment. Can I ask where you are and what you're up to?
Yeah, I'm in Italy. I'm enjoying the family a little bit. I'm here with my girlfriend and her father. And then next week we go back to Spain to see my mother. So I'm going 1.5 weeks to chill out a little bit. Of course, I keep on training, and it's good to have your mind somewhere else, and then for 1.5 week, and then continue back to business.
Brilliant. Well, look forward to seeing you at Spa, and I know you go well there. I hope you have another good race.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think it will be good fun. Hopefully a lot of Dutch people will come there. It's close to home, so we'll see.
Yep. Thanks very much, Giedo. All the best.
All right, no worries. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Giedo van der Garde, a young Dutchman, I think with plenty of potential. Yes, he's very good at putting sponsorship deals together, but he's also doing a good job. And let's face it, at the end of the day, the guy's just a racing driver, wants to go racing, and he's found the money. He's made it happen, and let's give him credit for that, and all the best to him. Anthony, haven't got that much time left, but I'd like to get your view on but I'd like you to review the current edition of F1 racing. And first of all, on the front cover, obviously to do with the Rush movies, he puts on his new Oakley optical eyewear. Very nice, thank you very much. Win Rush premiere and private screening tickets. What's that all about?
Well, 2 days before the release, which I believe is on the 13th of September, that's the general release, we're doing a private screening for competition winners and readers in the Soho Hotel, which has its own little private screen. And all being well, I believe you're going to be doing, we hope, a live-streamed edition of The Racer's Edge with relevant guests, people who were around in the James Hunt, Niki Lauda era.
Brilliant, we look forward to that.
Yeah.
And what's going with this front cover to Hungary, what's the sort of general feeling in the Formula One paddock about the movie and nostalgia in general?
Yeah, well, it's an interesting one for us because obviously F1 Racing isn't explicitly a retro magazine. We tend to do modern, contemporary Formula One. But we felt with the release of a Hollywood movie about F1, admittedly one that isn't entirely true to the original story, but nevertheless pretty close, we felt it was the right thing to do, to make a bit of a fuss about this film. It's not, it's 50 years almost since Hollywood's made an F1 film, Frankenheimer's Grand Prix, as we all know. So we felt it was the right thing to do, and we've had a generally very positive reaction. It doesn't mean F1 racing is going retro, but we do feel with this particular story this year, two such charismatic individuals as James Hunt and Niki Lauda, it was basically a no-brainer to go there, and we hope the readers enjoy the mag.
Well, from 1976 to 2013, you went up to Finland to see Valtteri Bottas doing something other than driving racing cars with his very beautiful girlfriend.
Yes, I went to his hometown, the name of which escapes me now because it's a couple of months ago. Anyway, it's about 30 miles north of Helsinki. And we went lake swimming and we watched him play ice hockey. He used to be an extremely good ice hockey player actually until he was about 15, but then he had to choose motor racing. And his dad had taken him to go-kart tracks, and Valtteri was just drawn towards the racetracks rather than the ice rink. But he really loved getting back on skates. He hadn't done it for 7 years, and he was a little bit tentative at first, but within about, honestly, 5 minutes, he was just shooting around, and you could just see, athletic people, they have that natural balance, and you could just see it was easy for him just to balance away on skates and slam pucks into a net.
And I see he went swimming too with his partner. How was that? How well does he swim? And B, how well does she swim?
Well, she's phenomenal because she's in the Finnish Olympic squad. Valtteri apparently couldn't actually swim at all until about a year ago, 18 months ago. But he has been, Emilia, his girlfriend's called, he's been swimming with Emilia and training a little bit with her. Obviously, they're rather different standards, but he's, by any normal standards, not by the standards of a Finnish Olympian, he's a strong swimmer.
Anthony, lots of good Rush-related features here. Nice interview with Niki Lauda. And I must say that shot of Niki's car being taken back to the pits was just, it brought back so many memories actually. You can't imagine what it was like back then.
You were there, weren't you?
Yeah, I was there, and it was, I remember talking to Jackie Stewart once. It was actually when his mother died, and Jackie was saying that he was of the opinion, and he was talking about the soul, the existence of the soul, I think, and he was saying, I think we have a certain amount of he described it like a fluid in a bag that is there which is our emotion, but there is a point where you use up all the fluid and the emotion goes because there's just nothing more left. And I think that's, looking back now, that's what it was like in the 70s. We lost so many young guys, and in the end it was kind of, let's Autosport Motor News and where's the next race, and just get on with it, because you couldn't even allow yourself to think about it. Otherwise you just wouldn't work in the industry, let alone drive race cars again. And that's how it was. But for a guy like Nicky to be here today, surviving and talking and doing the job he's doing, is just brilliant. A nice shot there of Carlos Reutemann in the garage at Monza. I remember how upset Nicky was that Carlos was in that car running a third Ferrari.
The expression says it all.
Monza in 76. Expression says it all. And Carlos is basically saying, well, what do you want me to do? I drive the car. They tell me to drive the car. I don't drive the car. If you don't want me to drive the car, I don't drive the car. No problem. Anyway, and the James Hunt interview, not an interview, obviously, but there's a piece I did on James, which was a lot of fun writing, because James was such a good guy. You could never, you only had to spend a minute with James and you'd learn something or have a laugh, or he had an opinion about something, and it was always outrageous, whether it was his latest divorce or what was going on at the time. Just superb. And I love some of the parade shots you got in here as well, Anthony. What's your favourite parade photograph in this month's issue?
The one I like best, if you just flick over a couple, it's a Vladimir Rees shot of Lewis's. It's just an up-close helmet shot, but if you look a little closely, as we hope you do, to these DPS pictures, as we call them, double page spread, you can see Lewis's eyes through the colours in his visor, the reflections in his visor, and there's actually quite a sinister element to it, because you really see the racing driver focus behind the lens.
Yeah, wonderful photograph.
It's a great picture.
Well, lots going on in this month's edition of F1 Racing, and I think you just finished the cover for next month's as well. Tell us about that.
Yeah, well, we're just putting it together. It's McLaren's 50th anniversary in September, so our September issue will make a big fuss about McLaren at 50, and the way we're celebrating that on the cover is to have the 7 cars in which drivers have won a driver's title. The 7 drivers that won those titles, obviously they're not all still with us, so there's a little bit of photoshopping that's gone on, plus a Bruce McLaren image and car, plus a picture of Jensen with his car. So we've got 9 cars, 9 drivers over a triple gatefold. It's quite a production, and I think, fingers crossed, it has just about come together, but it's still far from finished.
Can't wait to see it. One driver who is yet to make Formula One, but making a big impression in GP2 this year, and I think he's got a big future ahead of him as well, because he happens to be closely managed by the Webber consortium, Mark Webber and Neil, who we know very well. It's Mitch Evans, young New Zealander. He's starting to get some good string of podium finishes behind him in GP2. We spoke to him after Hungary. Mitch, good job. Second in the Sunday sprint race at Hungary. Best result so far in GP2. Mind you, after the start you made at Monaco, but I think you set a new world record or whatever in acceleration runs. I assume you were going to be leading into turn 1 in Hungary from that sprint race.
So was I, mate. It sort of caught me out, the grip level that we had at Hungary, which was a bit of a shame, but I was hoping to have a similar launch to my Monaco one, but it wasn't meant to be. So we had to sort of regroup and rethink how the race was going to plan out. But I'm pretty happy with my second place. I was really wanting the win, but at the end of the day, we just weren't quick enough, and Burton sort of deserved to win.
It's I know this thing about where is that elusive couple of tenths is always a perennial thing in motorsport, but in GP2 and GP3 to some extent, it seems to be a bigger thing than ever. You see guys like Coletti, quick one weekend, slow the next. It's just incredible. And I suppose in that context, your season so far, you've got to be pretty happy with the consistency. I think you've had, 3-4 podium finishes now, haven't you?
Yeah, that was my 4th podium, so I'm pretty happy with that. Coming into this season, I had no idea what was going to happen with my season. I was just going to take it as it comes and just do my best. I would have loved a win by now, but as we know, this year is massively competitive. So, I'm surprised I haven't won as well. So,
but why is GP2 so fragile, if that's the right word, in terms of consistency, one race to the next?
For a lot of reasons, really. One, obviously, the car's not massively easy to drive. 2, obviously the tyre on is very tricky as well, especially the tyre management, and also to get the most out of it for qualifying. So you see the experienced guys like Coletti, Ericsson, and those sort of guys. They can start the weekend very strong instantly because they got that experience. Where for me it's quite difficult because I'm trying to learn we only get half an hour's practice, and I'm trying to learn the car at that track, and we only get really 2 or 3 push laps in practice because just with the way or how much the tyres hold up. So for me, that's quite difficult. So that's why the guys that have done a few seasons have got a bit of a upper hand on rookies like myself.
But then, as I say, it's no consolation. But then you do see a guy like Coletti going to Hungary and being nowhere. So it even happens to them, even more than any other category I think I've ever seen in my life. It's just a really weird thing this year there. But anyway, you've kind of explained it as well you can. When you say the cars are not super easy to drive, can you just describe that a little bit? We know the steering's very heavy for a start.
Obviously, they're very physical to drive. Unlike Formula One, we've got no power steering, so the steering can be very heavy. For the likes of Silverstone, it can get very, very, very tricky in the race. It's very tough, but it's a lot of horsepower in the car, a lot of torque, and there's 680 kgs. With the car, but there's also 600 horsepower, so it's almost 1-to-1 with the horsepower and weight, which is it's very. You do feel it especially when I came out from GP3, it was like, righto, this is a bit of a difference. But obviously the tire we're on is good, but it's also very tricky to maintain. So that's something that's been quite difficult to get used to. And it's obviously, the car is in terms of Formula 1 terms, it's very basic, but when you got each ladder from GP3, there's new things you have to learn, and also pit stops, and just there's a few things where it takes a good season or two to get to get a hang of, really. So
and that pit stop thing was so disappointing for you at Monaco. Brilliant in qualifying. You're quickest in your group in qualifying at Monaco, and then leading. But it was the whole tyre choice pit stop thing that kind of ruined that race for you, wasn't it? I say ruined, you still finished third, but could have won it.
Yeah, exactly. And one of the biggest things that was the biggest difference was, the tyre compound we were on. We did start on the super soft. I was coming up to the grid on the soft tyre, and it just didn't feel right. I felt like I had no grip at all, so I wanted to change to the super soft. And at the time it felt right, but once we got racing, the soft tire, like the tire that Sam Bird was on, and most of the others, it sort of came into its own a bit, and it wasn't really the tire, or the super soft wasn't the tire to be on in the end. So when I had to come to pit, I had to do all 4, and I lost time with that, where most of the other guys just did rears, or if they stayed on the soft, and I lost time with that. Yeah. Once we got into the soft tyre, the car was completely different, and I had a lot more speed, but I was obviously behind Kevin Chacon, so I couldn't really challenge Sam. But, saying that, I did have a new set of softs for the next race, so I did have another opportunity to get another result, and from that I got another podium. Where you see Sam, he used all his tyres and all his soft tyres in race 1, so he had nothing left for race 2. But
it was a good sprint. Yeah. You passed a lot of cars too early on in that sprint race, didn't you? At Monaco.
Yeah, I got another mega start like the first race, and passed a few on the first lap, and sort of just held position for the rest of the lap. Quay Fobbs, he was in second, I was in third, and he was defending well, and but I was happy with third. Two podiums at Monaco in 1 weekend. One that I'll probably never forget, and I'm very proud of.
Yeah, it was brilliant. Tell us about that start. Was it 2.6 seconds or something up to 100 kilometres an hour? Is that right? The fastest Arden start anyway in 10 years? Have I got my facts right there? Something like that?
Well, it's the fastest they've ever been, able to record. And it honestly was just like I had so much grip. Coming up to the start line, I could hardly break any traction. I just did my start, but it just got so much grip.
And do you think that was a function of just getting a perfect lap onto the grid in terms of tire temperature, or do you think it was just magically everything coming right in terms of steering wheel, clutch, throttle?
A combination of things. Monaco is very grippy anyway. The start box is very grippy, so that always helps. We're on the super soft tire, the soft tire, so that helps as well. And everything just sort of fell into place, and I was able to. It's from track to track, you'll find differences in the grip levels. So you've got to modify your procedure really to try and get the best start. But Monaco's sort of the best combination because you're on a grippy track and you've got the super soft tires, so you can't really go wrong. So you normally see the fastest starts of the year at Monaco. I
suppose there was a bit of banter between you and Mark Webber after that one about you'd be happy to give him a few lessons on starting, and this would be the charge rate.
Well, obviously Mark's has troubles with starts, which haven't always, I guess, been his fault. But yeah, definitely felt good after that, and he saw as well. So said it was a pretty handy start as well. But that sort of set me up for a really good weekend as well. So it just shows you how crucial it is, especially at Monaco. It's all about the start, and overnight from qualifying, I was just thinking about my clutch release and trying to get the best jump possible, and I managed to put that into when I was in the moment. So
excellent stuff. And then Silverstone, I remember having a quick chat to you there, showed how quickly things can change from very small things. Just tell us about that incident with the speed limiter coming into the pit lane and how that can just completely destroy a weekend, basically.
Yeah, that really hurt. But what basically happened is I was leading the race because I was going along on the prime tyres, so I was coming in, and when I put the pit speed limiter on, it flashes at you on the screen to tell you that you're on it and it's engaged, and that all happened, and that was all good, and I got down to the correct speed before the line on the pit entry. And what happened is there was a spike, and one of my wheel speed sensors failed on the warm-up lap, so we got two on each front wheel. One of them failed on the warm-up lap, which was never great, but at least we got another one there. But when I was coming as soon as I crossed the line, basically, the other one had a spike and said I was doing 0 kilometers per hour, which sort of disengaged the pit speed, because the pit speed limiter gauges off the wheel speed sensor. Right. So it was basically saying I was doing 0K, so it wasn't working the pit speed. And I got all this wheel spin all of a sudden. It was really bizarre how it all happened, and it just sent me over the speed limit. And then when it kicked back in the wheel speed sensor, it brought me back down to the normal speed. But it was obviously, I was doing like 70k a time because instead of 60 because of it. So saying that was really unfortunate. And people probably don't really know the full story about it, which is annoying because it's normally a driver error which happens there. But yeah, it was definitely an opportunity to get a race win was sort of vanished because I came out we did a prime strategy to try and maximize our speed, which was very handy, and I was catching Sam in the lead, but yeah, it was only a matter of time before I was called into the pits for a stop go. So
very, very unfortunate, and I'm glad you got the opportunity to talk about that now, because as you say, it's so easy just to dismiss a speed penalty as just a driver error, as you say. Mitch, I'm sure it's only a matter of time before you do start some winning. In the meantime, just bring us up to speed. Your thoughts on Mark's retirement from Formula One?
I think it's I'll obviously spend a lot of time with Mark and all the details, and yeah, I think it's a great opportunity for him. I know he's very passionate about Porsche and the branding, and for him, I think it's perfect timing as well. He's obviously had a very, very successful career up until now, and I think he's very proud of his achievements, and he should be. He's still performing very, very well, and I think that's when you sort of need to. And he's obviously coming to the end of his F1 career because he's getting on, with the age of it, in Formula One terms anyway. And I think it was an opportunity for him he couldn't really turn down. It was brilliant, and I wish him all the best for it because it's obviously another. It's always hard for an F1 driver to probably pull the pin and close that chapter. So he's obviously in one of the best teams as well. So I think it's very exciting for him. A new challenge. He's obviously been to Le Mans before, but this is in a different environment, I guess. And he's really looking forward to it. So exciting times for him.
Does Mark let you out in his Carrera road car at all?
No, unfortunately. I might have to just sneak in and grab the keys one day.
Hopefully you'll be getting a freebie from him next year.
I'm hoping so. I'm waiting for it, but I'm hoping he's put my order in.
And Mitch, one final question. When you and Mark are out training now, bikes, running, swimming, whatever you're doing, I'm assuming you're sort of 2-3% ahead of him in every dimension now, right?
I don't want to embarrass him, to be honest. No, but obviously Mark's very, very fit. He's renowned for his fitness and his outdoor, sports basically. And it's very, very good for me to sort of experience that and train with him. Because we get to train basically every day together, which is great. But yeah, we're on a very, very similar level, which is great for me just to know that I've got the ability, and got the physical strength and fitness to hang on to one of these beasts. So for me that's been exceptional, and I'm just going to keep trying building on that. And so that's it's for me. It's been great preparation and a good sort of benchmark for me.
Well, you couldn't have anything better than the three people you have with you, Gilly plus Mark and Anne. Brilliant, and you're making very good use of that, Mitch. Great to talk to you, and all the best at Spa. Look forward to seeing you through, not necessarily through Eau Rouge, but through Blanchiment and Pouin. Should be a lot of fun. Yeah,
and a GP2 car. It's going to be a bit of a wake-up call, probably going through Eau Rouge for the first time. So yeah, I can't wait to get on track. It's obviously one of the highlights of the year, and and a GP2 car. It's going to be amazing. So can't wait. Just before you go, I heard a helicopter. Is that right? Taking off in the background there. What's going on there? Oh yeah, that's Mark going for his lesson. He's learning to fly helicopters. So he's gone off for a bit of a blast in this wet weather. But I'm a bit jealous, to be honest. How far down the road is he with that, or up in the sky with that? Is he with that? I think he's around 30 hours. But he's obviously just starting out. He's still got his theory to do as well, and I've been fortunate enough to go in for a few lessons, and I've nearly got the addiction as well. But it'll be interesting. It'll be interesting to know what happens to his menagerie when he does get the license and starts landing that helicopter regularly on the tennis court there. The donkeys and the llamas and the dogs and the chickens. Oh no, I don't want to know. But feathers everywhere. I'm sure Anne won't be impressed, but Mark's he seems to be in love with it. So good stuff. It's not a bad hobby. Thanks, Mitch. See you soon, mate. Thank you. Yeah, bye.
Mitch Evans. I think he's in good hands with Anne Neal and Mark Webber behind him, Anne, don't you?
I'm sure they'll look after him all right, yeah.
Thanks very much for joining us, Anne, as we look back at the Hungarian Grand Prix. Next week, we will have in the studio here, we're planning to have in the studio, assuming he gets back from the Highlands, where he's doing yet another classic car rally, Alistair Corbell, the former McLaren and Brabham team manager, as we build up to this anniversary of the starting of Bruce McLaren motor racing back in 1963. Alistair will be talking about the early days at McLaren, in which he was very much a part, so don't miss that. Again, thank you, and thank you for watching to The Racer's Edge. We'll be back again next week on Thursday. Don't forget to watch us on YouTube or download us on iTunes. Follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook. See you then.